It's a cold open, so we're live. Hi,
Beautiful.
Drew.
Hey, man.
Dude, I didn't know. You just told me that you're like post-op. I knew you were going in for an operation literally this morning, or was it yesterday?
It's so funny. I was reading our threads, and I'm like, yeah, let's do a spaces. And I go, Ian, it's really tough. I'm having an operation the day before. And your response was, all right, we'll see you at 3:30 Eastern time. I'm like, dude, spaces, right? I can on my back, I can hold a phone and do it. Yeah, you're like, okay, see you at StreamYard at 12:30. I'm like, oh my God.
Dude.
Oh, so if I was telling Ian, I speak pretty good French normally, and a friend of mine called me from France this morning. I couldn't do it. I said my brain isn't working right, and I thought, oh, this is going to be awesome. So that's have your way with me.
Let's do it. So that was the anesthesia that.
Yeah, they had me like on Versed for like 8 hours yesterday. So I had these stem cell injections into my shoulder joint, and it required harvesting my bone marrow and fat, and I was just being operated on all day long. It was crazy. But
So wow. What is it like, the stem cells?
Well, these guys, here's I have terrible shoulder problems from lifting weights my whole life. And I always just avoided doing anything because I didn't want the operation. I didn't want to do physical therapy, and I was just being an asshole. And finally, Susan, my wife, found out about some guy who was doing stem cells. I went and see him, and he has great outcomes for what I got. And I thought, all right, well, that I'm willing to do. That I'll go do. But I got to remember, I'm old and big operations knock the shit out of me. That's the way it goes. But,
what was the operation the surgery you didn't want to get?
Oh, I'm on the eve of a shoulder replacement, both sides. And that never goes well. And it's just the interesting thing about what this guy does is, of course, because there's no pharmaceutical company to benefit from the procedure, there's no money to do the randomized controlled trial. So it's only just these guys that are these practitioners are doing these procedures and their outcomes. And you've got to just trust that it's something that they know what they're doing. And I've been pretty impressed. I know you see on Rogan a couple weeks ago, Sean Baker went in and had stem cells injected into his back, and it's becoming much more commonplace these days.
We get it with our cat. He had like kidney issues, and it's all experimental, but I took him up to New York State, and we got all these, and it's just massive improvement over the course of a year.
So he has like kitty cord. Cord kitten, what blood? How do they get the stem cells?
I think they harvested out of his fat. There's multiple ways, and they chose that one.
That's how they got me, and that's actually the part of having the most. I was surprised how much they had to do to get the fat.
Yeah, what was that?
I thought it was just gonna be a little bit of like something, and then they were. We'll see what this looks. I'm afraid to take off the bandages. I don't know. It feels so bad in there. We shouldn't be talking about this. Let's talk about something people are
definitely. This is fucking fascinating. I think it's so good. Do you know the process of the stem cells? Do you know like the physiology of what they do?
I asked him. So the idea is because I have cartilage and soft tissue problems bad in my shoulders. The kind of stem cell that will set itself up there is called a mesenchymal stem cell. These are all from, our soft tissue comes out of mesenchymal origin. And there are still mesenchymal stem cells in our bone marrow and in our fat. So he essentially uses, I was asking him about it. Yes, he essentially uses a ultrafiltration method to using size. Apparently the stem cell size is predictable, and you can get the fat out, you get the stem cells left behind, and off you go. And he with three injections, and he went all the way to my rotator cuff from inside to the back. And I was like, and the whole time it was so painful. I thought, I'm really good with pain. Pain does not bother me at all. I thought, I don't see how anybody tolerates this. This is wildly painful.
So you were awake then?
They kept trying to put me to sleep with Versed, and I just the pain was too much. It just wake me up.
Oh, so. Would they do more Versed? And then be like,
they did more, and then they added Toradol. Interestingly, you can't really add opiates to the Versed because that makes you stop breathing. And they put some Toradol in, and wow, that really, really worked. I was very impressed.
Interesting. I'm not familiar with that.
It's sort of an anti-inflammatory. I used to use it a lot for patients in heroin withdrawal, and I just was never confident in it because they're so miserable, they're so uncomfortable, and we'd give them quite a bit of it, and they would seek it. They liked it. But I was really surprised how well it worked. So.
Do you feel your shoulders regenerating?
Not yet. We'll give it some time.
Dude.
I have to, give it complete. I'm a nut when it comes to working out and stuff. I work out every day. This is going to be the first 2-week period I haven't worked out since I was probably 40 years. It's freaking me out a little bit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once that deceleration, then they like reaccelerating it is kind of its own journey. Are you gonna
Thank you, Ian. Appreciate it.
Do you have a soak?
Indeed.
Are you gonna like soak in the tub?
I could do that. They're just saying use local heat for now. They really just want me down. They would just rest and just give it a few days and see.
Oh,
see where
okay.
we are.
So like, because I noticed with Bucko, the cat who's getting it, it's usually about 2 or 3 days after he gets the injections that he starts to come back. And like, way better.
That's what it feels like. Now, is he getting injections into the joints? He said it was a kidney problem.
I don't know. I haven't been with him at the hospital when he gets the injection itself. I don't know. I think it's subdermal, right?
And it's his own fat, right?
Yeah. They did an incision. They're like, it's just a little incision, and we go in and then like scoop it out and then spin it down and then reintroduce it.
But this whole, it really opens the conversation to this whole world of, medicine is not what we thought it was. I think COVID kind of taught us that, and we have to be open to a lot of things, therapeutically and on the supplement side, on many different, and what about vaccines, not vaccines? We have to really be much more open to the conversations about things people should be contemplating for health and wellness.
You were like hardcore in the medical industry, like administering pharmaceuticals as normal. And then did your mind just get blown? Not
just normal. I that's what I do as an internist. I diagnose illness and I change the course of illness with pharmaceutical agents. That's just what we did. I did not give any thought to other sources of treatment. I just didn't do it. I had just what was published in the literature. I trusted it. I read it religiously. I analyzed it, and then I made decisions accordingly. I still do that. I mean, I haven't changed my practice that much. It's just I'm open to a lot more ideas, including, as I'm sure you'll appreciate. I mean, I'm on the record saying years ago, I started saying, look, there aren't enough vaccines on earth for me and my family. Give me more, take more. I'm all about it. Well, now I'm open to the idea that maybe that's not such a great idea. And the way the bureaucracies are dealing with these vaccines in particular have just been mind blowing to me. I feel like I'm in a different planet.
I think it's really the key is establishing immunity. Like that's where we should all be focused, whatever the vessel to get there. And it doesn't have to be a total immunity. I mean, that's kind of insane, but like just
people are biological. People get sick. I was listening to someone just yesterday, and she was, taking the conversation all the way to the idea that we have so sanitized death and illness is people don't understand that all those things are inevitable as a human being, and we have no experience with them as a population. And when something comes along, we go berserk. We have no judgment. And that's not good. That's not, because it is part of the human experience. That's what I think of when I see these guys, these millionaires that are out there trying to, live their life, live every day to increase their longevity to 110 or whatever. That's not living. We've lost track of what living is. Listen, the very foundation of philosophy was about what is a good life, not how can you live as long as possible. As long as possible is not necessarily, in fact, likely to not be a good life.
What do you think of, what's that?
Go ahead.
About all this life extension stuff out of Harvard that David Sinclair and folks are working on, like with sirtuin regrowth, NMN, NAD plus, things like that.
I take NR, I take nicotinamide riboside. It makes sense to me that the oxidative state of the cell would have an impact on aging. Whenever anybody says to me, hey, you look younger than your age, I always think, God, I wonder if that's that NR. But I was listening to Peter Attia, who's your best source on longevity. He just is. He was talking to a guy, maybe it was Sinclair, and he was saying, look, if you're gonna have something that's significantly something that shifts the physiologically sufficiently that you impact longevity, you're going to have to start taking it in your 30s and 40s. And I thought, boy, no one ever makes that point. He's absolutely correct. It's not something you can take when you're 85 and expect to add another 5 years to your life. It does not work like that.
Oh, is that a fact that it doesn't have like, it has some effect, but it doesn't have as much effect or
It
something?
depends what we're talking about, of course. I mean, look, Peter, who I was, picking his brain about all these things one day, and he just finally snapped at me and went, "Look, vigorous exercise, the only thing that we know for sure impacts longevity." And I thought, well, that makes sense to me too. So I'm by vigorous exercise, he means resistance training, getting your heart rate up into that moderate zone, and doing that at least, my opinion, 5 days a week. My humble opinion, and he's right. Because we all hit a zone where we fall out of bed. It always 100% of the time. If you live long enough, you will hit a stage where your mobility, your muscle mass, it just collapses. And that happens. Some people in their 70s, some people in their 80s, some people in their 90s. The idea is to push that back as far as possible. Remember when Charlie Munger was still alive, he kept saying to everybody, gosh, the greatest threat to my life is falling. He's absolutely correct. Once you hit your later 90s, fall is your number one risk of dying.
So what is your, like, I mean, is it working out the best thing to establish balance?
I'm not balanced, so it's hard for me to advocate balance. I'm sort of a nut about it. I think you do the exercise and you follow a diet first and foremost that you will do. Because I live in this world. I always tell people I live in a world where to get a patient to take a pill twice a day is almost impossible. People don't realize how tough it is to change behavior. It is really hard. And if somebody does not like working out or has never worked out or has never managed their diet, and you're asking for some major changes to how their day operates, it's very tough. It's tough for people.
I noticed I just started working out about 5 months ago for a music video that Tim and I were doing, Tim Pool. And it was like, the video is, my guy is he's basically, he wastes away over the course of the video because of opioid addiction. Yeah. I mean, it's without spoiling too much of the video. And then we shot the end of the video first, where I was like 128 pounds, fucking rail thin, worm arms and all that shit. And then I worked out, went up to like 2,600 calories a day. I was doing like 900 calories a day is my norm. And put on like 15 pounds, and it looked good, really good. And but it was the purpose. It was like having a goal. It was like, not just like, hey, do it because you'll feel better. Do it because you look good. It was like I needed some tangible.
So that's you, right? And so that's how everybody has their own relationship with these things, like working out. For me, I have, it's almost meditative. It's something I need to do every day. It's just a requirement. It's always been something I've needed to do. Just I think about things. I listen to podcasts. I told you earlier, I speak French. I study my French. I do other things. Listen to French history lessons, and I need it every day, and I enjoy it. I feel very lucky that that's the way I am. Because most people are not that way.
Did you see Napoleon?
I did not see Napoleon, but I watched about 8 lectures by French scholars on the movie. They got notes. I'll tell you what they got. The French got notes. It was interesting. Let me share with you. The one note that came up repeatedly, which actually fascinated me, is that the Napoleon that we think of, that Napoleon changed a lot across his career. And Napoleon we think of with the hat and the hand in the coat vest and stuff, that is the British's cartoon version of him when they were trying to raise money and raise armies to go after him. They were demeaning him with the imagery we now think of as who he is.
So that pot belly, yeah. What was he like? Tall and thin and muscular?
No, nothing like that. Nothing like that. But he was brilliant. He was a master administrator, right? I mean, the Napoleonic law, the lycée system in France, the baccalaureate in France, the metric system. These were all out of his head, and he managed to impose it or superimpose it administratively over most of Europe. Most of Europe still has a lot of the legal and engineering structure that he put in place, and he was a great military leader and stuff, but he was he was really not very interested in politics, and all his business with Josephine was just sort of youthful bullshit. It was just sort of his first relationship, and she had clearly a borderline personality disorder and sucked him into some stuff, and he got out when he could, and that was that. And he went on to become a great leader.
I heard that the movie, I didn't see it, I don't know if I will, but it was about him and Josephine and how he's just like a soy bitch, and that he just kind of ran his shit.
It was kind of like that at the beginning. He really he did not have much experience with women. This is all, I'd read a lot about this before the film came out. So, because I was fascinated by Josephine, I thought, oh, this woman has got a personality disorder. You can see it. And it was back, you'll like this. I started reading all this stuff when I was thinking about my narcissism book. I wrote a book on narcissism. And in that book, that was about 15 years ago. And in that book, maybe it was 12 years ago, I can't remember now, but in that book, I wanted to put a chapter on other periods of history where there'd been such a predominant of narcissistic personality styles as we have today. And the only two times I could really find that were clear to me, one was Aztecs and how they scapegoated and managed and created warriors. And the other was pre-revolutionary France. And France in particularly interested me because the French still dismiss the craziness of much of their history, particularly during that era, as just, well, that's just how, they'd have, some of the men were just extraordinarily abusive to women. And the way the French historians look at it now, it's like, yeah, he loved women. That's just his thing, man. He was just into it. It's like, what? This guy was a sociopath, and he was a misogynist, and he was horrible to women. But anyway, the point being, there was so much childhood trauma leading up to the French Revolution. It was ridiculous. And people like Josephine, that these people, the prostitution and the sort of the salons and all this stuff where people were with severe personality disorders hung out. And it was clear to me that she had a borderline kind of features. And so I thought, well, he got sucked into that. That's
whoa. I see the correlation between today. I mean, narcissism with internet video. Like, I'm looking at my face right now. It's right next to yours, and I like what I see. That's good in some sense. Like, you want to like yourself, but at what point does it become narcissism? I'm like, I check my notifications. I got 9 new follows. I like it. Is that like, I can't.
No, narcissism is not necessarily a self-preoccupation or an egotism. Though it's often has those qualities, but that's not the core issue. The core issue in narcissism is childhood trauma. And in the setting of childhood trauma, the child leaves the frame of closeness that the child needs to develop an emotional regulation system. See, we're not born regulated. Regulation develops in the context of intimate contact. Mom reflecting on us, offering us soothing affects after those affects are identified by mom and attuned to and reflected back. That's the basic system of emotional regulation. And if you've been traumatized, that closeness is too threatening. So they leave the frame and they lose a connection to the primary emotional landscape. Feelings come from your body. This is why I was watching on TikTok, somebody interviewing a robot, and the robot was like, I have human feelings. Like, no, you don't. No, you don't. You observe human emotions, and then you have some facsimile understanding of what that is. Feelings are spontaneous biological events from the body, from a human body. That's where feelings come from. And when we do not develop a robust connection between those primary affects and a second order understanding and regulation of those emotions, that's narcissism. And when we have that disconnect, we tend to look in the environment for solutions to how we're feeling. We can't go back into the frame of closeness because that's too threatening. We might get traumatized again. We get from the environment what we need. And usually we build ourselves up to be bigger than the small center we're feeling, to buttress against the emptiness and the phone and the smallness that we feel inside. And in those settings, for a narcissist, feelings don't matter because they're not connected to their feelings. They don't really feel their feelings. And when their feelings don't matter, guess what? Your feelings don't matter either. So the environment, it's not a sociopath. They're capable of feelings, but they need to get certain things from the environment and they're very resistant to any changes. They dismiss people easily, and they're prone to empathic failure and exploitation of other people.
I remember when I was like 5, empathic fail. I want to lock that in: empathic failure and you said exploitation of other people. That's part of it. Is you just okay? When I was like 5, my cat died. I remember, and my parents were burying it out back, and I was crying and crying. And I came inside and sat down at the Atari 2600 and started playing, and immediately wasn't sad, and I stopped crying. And I thought, wow, if I'm ever sad, I can play video games and I'll feel better. And it was like, maybe it was that something sounds like. Yeah, what you're
Well,
going to say.
I would call that a problem, and not in the sense that it leads to narcissism, but it leads to dissociation from your feelings. See, what you want is a good connection to your primary affects and the ability to regulate them, not the need to dissociate from them. Does that make sense? And when you're playing a video game, you're sort of out of body, out of this world. You're dissociated. And that, it's that some people could do that fine and it has no impact. Others do that now with all feeling states and really can't feel their primary emotions very well at all. The other thing, and the bigger thing that I wanted to write about in the book, was when I was, and part of my preoccupation with France was I kept saying there's going to be guillotines, because narcissists, when they're in the population, they scapegoat. They gather together in mobs and they take their aggression and they focus it on someone or some group. Here we are, everybody. Well done. We are in it. I didn't know anything about cancel culture. That had not been invented yet. And now this situation with Jewish, it's rampant, this scapegoating mechanism. And it's a way that narcissists use not to focus their aggression on each other.
What is causing this upsurge in narcissism in modern culture?
I think it was childhood trauma primarily. I mean, all those years doing Loveline, that's all we did was talk to people every night, call after call. I mean, I witnessed firsthand the magnitude of the childhood trauma. It was just profound. And we pretended as though it wasn't happening. It wasn't until well into the 90s that my profession developed something called the Adverse Childhood Experience Scale. They started seeing all these people with severe medical problems who had really serious circumstances they were coming out of. And they thought, oh, look at this. Looky here. It turns out if you have more than 3 adverse childhood experiences, your health isn't so good when you grow up. You're more likely to get drug addiction. Oh my goodness, you're more likely to be depressed and suicidal. Shocking. Well, of course, childhood experiences have massive impact, disproportionate impact on all else that follows.
And that's like a childhood traumatic experience would be like your mom slaps you in the face once.
Well, well, not necessarily. It could be. I mean, it does happen that way, but the thresholds. So the adverse childhood experience list includes things like family member who's incarcerated, family member who's using drug addiction, domestic violence between the parents, abandonment or inadequate supervision. These are all you need is 3 before your risk of medical and psychiatric problem goes sky high. In terms of being hit, I always think of the threshold on physical abuse being struck with an object. And you'd be amazed how people deny that. I mean, in my world, when I was running a drug program for those 2 decades and a half, I always said, we ran a program that we could treat the most ill patients with polydiagnosed medical problems, psychiatric problems, substance problems, seizure disorder, and you name it, we could handle it. And I always said, if you had bad enough addiction that you need to see me, there was 100% probability you had childhood trauma. And yet, when I would sit down and talk to my patients, I'd always go, any history of physical abuse? No. Oh, no. And this was every patient. This is how it goes. So I knew no would be the answer. And I'll go, how about, were you disciplined? Oh yeah, I was disciplined like everybody else. Everybody gets disciplined, right? Yeah. How did your parents discipline you? Well, they hit me and they made me go out to the field and get a switch, and which already you're getting into really serious abuse at that point. And I'd go, well, anybody ever hit you with an object? And again, they'd always go, no. And I go, really, no object? Well, yeah, my mom used an axe once, and there was the baseball bat time. It's like every time. That's how, interestingly, our brains deal with trauma. We just push it off into the distance somewhere.
What is it about the object?
Because that's when you're really trying. Look, you pick up any kind of object and swing it at a 9-year-old, you are trying to harm that 9-year-old, or at least that 9-year-old believes you're trying to harm them. You understand? And the possibility of being seriously hurt is now entering the conversation.
Yeah, that makes sense. Even if it's like snapping them with a cloth. I mean, maybe.
I mean, you know, the spoon is a common thing in the cloth.
Yeah, we had a spoon with a hole in it.
Yeah,
So leave a
I
little
don't know.
welt.
You're getting in the zone, but I don't know. I don't like, you know, absolutes. It's like, yes, not everybody that's hit with a wooden spoon was traumatized. No, I'm not that person. But I'm certainly when I would sit down when somebody had bad enough addiction to see me, I knew the axe, the knife, was going to come up. I knew they'd have a story about something like that.
You talked about abandonment also, and I'm wondering if parents putting their kids in front of YouTube for 9 hours and just walking away and doing their stuff is a form of abandonment.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend of mine, and we were talking about education, and we were talking about how much it seems like, you know, certain parts of Europe, kids are they're better educated than college graduates by the time they're like 9 or 10. And I thought to myself, I said, you know what really started where their education of Americans started sort of drifting was television. Don't you remember? You're not old enough to remember this, but man, there was consternation. You're going to put your kids in front of the television. They're going to watch TV all day. In fact, the public health officials started saying we were going to get radiation. We were going to go blind. And they were trying all kinds of things to get kids not to sit in front of the TV and watch Felix the Cat. It didn't work. And now we've gone to some other much more addictive content. And I do think it gets people off the trail of building their brains the way we really need to. It's funny also, I say this all the time, but you know, when our schools here in California were closed for 2 years, I kept saying, hey, I am watching women run across the border to Poland from Ukraine with their kids. The news media is throwing microphone in these women's faces, and every single one of them would say the same thing. It's horrible. Our sons, our husbands are back there. They're having to fight. This is unbelievable. I can't believe it. And then they would say the following. They'd go, but our kids, these kids, they've been out of school for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. We have to get them in school. And I thought, oh, perfect. In the meantime, we're out for 2 years.
Geez, you know people that had their kids out?
All of California. What are you talking about? LA Unified was closed for 2 years. Where were you living?
I was in Maryland at the time.
Oh, the California was a shit show. And they were given these sort of iPad schools, that total failures, a lot of sexting, a lot of porn viewing, a lot of exposure to things that were just not education, actually were deleterious. I mean, the data's in. It was an abject failure.
I swear, whenever I sit down and play video games in my adult life, not every time, and it probably should be, I feel like I'm just wasting away. And my mom growing up would be like, "Get off the videos!" She'd scream it, you know, and I'd have to go outside. So I became an actor.
I don't know. Do you have you read Elon Musk's biography yet?
Negative.
He spends a lot of time playing video games. A lot. Guy's done okay. He still plays video games a lot, and he does it as a soothing mechanism. I get it. My kids do it. I didn't prevent them from doing it.
I guess it's like reading a book, similar, except you're looking at radiative screen.
I missed that era, right? So I have zero ability or interest in video games. I just didn't grow up with that. But I do know that people need to read. People need to read and read broadly and read constantly. It is a key feature of expanding our mind. It really is. You talk to anybody who's successful, they all say the same thing. Read.
Do you read a lot?
A lot. I go through binges. I'll get like 5 or 6 books going simultaneously, and then all of a sudden I'll stop for a couple months. So
do you read stuff that's like challenging to understand, or do you stick with like basic stories and stuff?
No, I tend to read in areas where I'm not as well educated or trained, you know, so I don't read science unless, you know, I read the book, I forget the name of the book, about the CRISPR technology and how it was developed and that kind of thing. But those really aren't science books. I read history, I read philosophy. I read biographies like crazy. I read lots of biographies.
These computer screens are no joke. I have been staring at them since I was 4, and my vision is fucked. It's like 2140, 2160. I don't know.
I don't know. I don't have anything to do with it necessarily.
Anecdotally, I was outside. My buddy was a photographer, and I was holding the bounce light cart. God, it's so red on my camera. It's the stupid purple thing. I'm going to try it without it for a minute.
There you go.
and I was bouncing the white light into the subject's eyes for like 5 hours, getting all this sunlight. And I guess in retrospect, it's called sun gazing. I came in and I had like 20/20 vision. Literally, I could see like super clear across the room. And then I sat down and looked at the computer screen and I could feel my mind twist. It was like this frequency. It was like just twisted my eyes back to blurry. And then I started reading about sun gazing, and it's like an ancient practice where when the sun's low to the horizon, you let it into your eye and it kind of washes over. You don't necessarily tighten the focus on the sun, but you let it into kind of, and from my experience, it clears up the goopy floaty things that float around. They just burn away. And
it must have something to do with the, I mean, you know, your lens is what you're focusing with, right? And it becomes, and the depth of the eye is what causes the myopia, and then the stiffness of the lens is what causes the close vision problems. So it's hard to understand how that would work, but I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, man. Oh, I love it. So how deep are you into like naturopathy now since COVID struck? And
I'm taking a lot of more supplements myself, and I'm working with the wellness company, and I am interested in here's the way I sort of think about this. I have been fighting to protect the autonomy of the patient-doctor relationship my entire career. I believe and am certain and have always believed that the most efficient unit in healthcare is a well-trained, caring physician and an informed patient. That's it. Those two, anything you do on top of that, you make everything less efficient, you'll make outcomes less good. And we have the insurance companies, the state regulators, the hospitals, the employment of physicians. It's just done. COVID really taught me that. It's just way worse than I thought. So I'm interested in now trying to find ways to put things into the hands of patients, whether it's telehealth or kits. We have emergency kits, so you keep kits on hand, and then you can consult with the telehealth if you want to when you need those things that are at hand. For instance, I have a very strong feeling right now that, you know, when I started doing Loveline in 1984, right? The reason I started doing that was Anthony Fauci at the time was telling us young physicians that we needed to go out and educate about this thing that we just stopped calling grids and just started calling AIDS. Okay. We sort of had a causative agent. We called it HTLV3. We probably just called it HTLV at that point. And the term safe sex hadn't been coined yet. I mean, this was the early days. And I was 24 years old. And I thought, oh my God, yes, this stuff is so easy that all the information that people should have around STDs, around AIDS, that just somebody's got to talk to young people about it. And I had this opportunity to go on the radio, and I just thought, oh, I'll try this. And at the time, you got to remember, we had just been through the sexual revolution. And the adults who were the ones bringing on this revolution and enjoying the fruits of it never contemplated that adolescents would also start having sex, right? That was just not part of the equation. Well, I was 24 years old. And I was very aware of what my peers were doing at my age and behind. And I thought, we have to talk to them. We have to just give them the information. They can, you know, condoms were behind the counter. You'd have to ask the pharmacist to bring the condom out. It was dark ages. And so I started talking about it, and it was considered weird. I got in trouble with my residency director, and something was wrong with me. I must have had mental illness or something. Then the word on HIV got out, that it was something widespread. I mean, it was weird that all of a sudden went from being forbidden to talk about to we had a mandate to talk about it. So I kind of kept going and talking about it. And I have the same feeling today that people should have access to PrEP and PEP. And do you know what that stuff is? Do you know how that works?
It's like like day before medicine or something.
The day before, or there's shots and things you can take, but there's also after medicine, the stuff you can take after exposure in case you think you've used a dirty needle or something. And it turns out there are antibiotics you can take every day that prevent gonorrhea and chlamydia and non-gonococcal urethritis. Why aren't we giving people access to this in the gumball machines? It's the wildest thing to me. And so I want to get at empowering people with these kinds of things that they should already have access to and not have to spend $80 seeing a doctor or $1,200 going to the emergency room.
Yeah, man, for-profit medicine's insane to me because it's like if it was for-profit fire departments, you don't think there'd be so many more fires, and who would be setting those fires? The people that profit off of the fire, putting out the fire. Like that makes me very nervous.
I get it makes you nervous, but I've never met a more ethical, good group than my peers. Now maybe it's changing in recent years. I don't know, but I always would shake my head and go, "Oh my God, these people are so selfless. They're here just for the patients. That's all they think about, and no one knows that. That's all doctors think about is doing right by their patients. It's profound." Now, these days, with the I saw what happened during COVID. It seemed like that isn't as powerful a ethical mandate as it was when I was growing up as a doctor.
I think a lot of them though did think they were doing what was right. I imagine, even though they were just doing what they were told to do, maybe they still felt like this is the right thing. I was told by the bureaucrats.
I'm sure people deluded themselves to that, but you didn't have to think very hard to go, we're just sending people home to come back when they're blue. Really? When have we ever done that? Yeah. Ever?
Prophylactics, dude. Preventative is what it's all. That's why diet is like my main. I mean, an exercise too, dude.
That's my thing. I'm with you, but I have something called Lynch syndrome, which is a DNA repair abnormality that puts me at risk for various things. So I'm 12 years post prostatectomy. I have prostate cancer. I'm hypertensive. I'm hypercholesterolemic. Mildly, I do the best I can with diet and exercise, but your genes determine way more than diet. And so I have to take a little bit of medicine. And that's the way it goes. We are biological entities, and you have to be very clear about what you can and can't do when you need pharmacology. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, man. COVID. I got COVID, and I was like, I think I can just let it happen and like work it out. And I didn't sauna enough. I should have done more heat treatment. But after day 4, I was like, God damn, it feels like fucking robots are in me. I didn't know what it was in my back. So we got all the pharma. We did the monoclonal antibody treatment.
Monoclonal antibodies were fantastic. And what pissed me off about that was that should have been the entirety of the public health message at the time. Here's what you do if you get sick. There are monoclonal antibodies, and they're free. And somebody will come to your house and infuse you. What the hell? Why wasn't it? And when I started talking about it, people were criticizing me, saying, "Oh, it's because you're special or you can afford it." Nope. Signed up, got it, free, just like you can.
It was banging. In fact, right before I got the needle in my arm, I went into a cold sweat, like a panic sweat, and I had like 101-degree fever. Yeah. I just broke out into this cold sweat. Before she even put the needle in me, my temperature broke like 1.7 degrees. I was down to 99 degrees. So like a lot of it, I think, is psychosomatic, or in that I think that your mind and your body can control itself and regulate itself in a way like terrain theory of disease. I'm very into germ theory as well as the terrain theory. Yeah. And that like meditation and posture, reparation and stuff can allow the body to fix itself.
All very helpful, but something will happen to you. You are biological, and all the good intentions and hard work, something will happen. And when it does, that's when you have to fight it back.
I got to ask, I heard this crazy conspiracy theory about HIV, and I wonder if it's real, that in the early 80s, it got introduced inadvertently into a batch of the MMR vaccine. HIV did. And so all these people were getting MMR vaccines, and it was the dudes that were taking poppers in like New York, partying till 5 a.m. that got really sick from it because their bodies weren't able to fight it off. And it was just mass introduced into the public. And so they thought, well, it's the gay people, because a lot of those people doing poppers till 5 a.m. happened to be gay in that partying community. Have you ever heard that?
What does poppers have to do with it?
Poppers were like the party drug of choice so it was destroying their immune systems. So they weren't ready to fight off the HIV.
We could measure HIV easily, and it would just, we found it when we found it. Trust me. What was
decided? Was it that it came from Africa? That it came from like a monkey?
We knew where case 0 got to this country. I don't know that we know exactly where it came from to this day. Even, I mean, there was theories about the green monkeys being slaughtered. And so given our experience with COVID, it makes you scratch your head and go, I wonder if there was some other origin for this that was a little less savory. I don't know.
Holy shit.
But it certainly got here through one case and then spread through the gay population.
Are you sure it wasn't?
They had much more heterosexual transmission.
Are you sure it didn't appear through a bat? I don't know, man.
Right,
They're like, it came from a monkey. It came from a bat.
Pangolin.
Like, oh, really? A pangolin. That's fucking crazy. Hey, how are you feeling, man? It's been we've gone for 40 minutes. This is great.
I'm holding up. I'm doing okay.
I got a few super chats I want to read. You're looking good, man. Where are we at here? This is from Adam Peer with the lies perpetrated by experts around vaxes and their efficacy will the lies perpetrated by experts about vaxes and their efficacy keep the general population from making the choice to receive them, and for how long?
Will the lies about their efficacy keep the population from making the choice to receive them? Do you understand the question?
Yeah, basically, I think what he's asking is like, if people were lying about or like misleading us about vaccines, is that going to cause people in the future to be resistant to wanting to get a vaccine?
Yes, there's no doubt that's happening, and it's one of the graver concerns, because there are, there's certain things that, if you've ever seen a child die of measles, you understand why we give the measles vaccine. I think there are two reasonable critiques of vaccine therapies in childhood. One is the same thing as with the COVID vaccine, that they are not held to the same standard as other pharmaceutical agents. And this is what RFK Jr. keeps asking. Why can't we do those studies? Why can't we do that research? Let's just do that research. So forget the fact that we've used it a million times, and you still need the randomized controlled trial to really understand what you're doing. That's a reasonable position. I'm not sure if I'm fully into that position, but that's a reasonable position. The other reasonable position is, do we know that giving so many vaccines simultaneously has no additive effects? Maybe we know. We have some data, surely. But it's still, again, that's another viable question. And because there are those questions, and because of our experience around COVID, I get that people are afraid now. I get it.
I like to use the term additive effects from multiple vaccines. I've used the term compound effects because maybe they're happening like as an additive plus this plus that, or maybe it's actually magnitudes of change.
Yeah.
And like, what the fuck, dude? I got like 6 or 8 vaccines in 1980. I was born in 79. So on the schedule, I think at the time was 4 to 8, whatever, over the course of 2 to 4 years. And now it's like 14. And it's like not all at once, but like in a short period of time sometimes.
Well, that's my question. Why? I don't really understand why the pediatricians insist on it being so done on top of each other. I mean, what's the problem with delaying some of this stuff? I don't quite get that. They need to explain that to me. And maybe just because I'm not a pediatrician, I don't get what they're thinking. But that part just makes me just go, So again, I think look, what we need is sunshine. We need fresh air. We need everybody bringing their material out and showing it, not telling the public that they can't handle the truth, or that it's not open for discussion. I worked in a psychiatric hospital for 30 years. You want to make somebody paranoid, you show them half the information and then tell them to make their own conclusion about the rest. Everyone gets immediately paranoid, and paranoid people then get conspiratorial. That's how it is. You must give them all the information. They don't get more paranoid about they may spin around for a while, but they will eventually get to a reasonable place when you give them everything. So that you can't handle the truth during COVID was just the most odd thing ever. That, there was a villain that said that in the movie, A Few Good Men. It was Jack Nicholson playing a villain, said those words, "You can't handle the truth." And we all laughed at it. Look at that big, look at that authoritarian monster. And all of a sudden that became our public health policy.
Yeah, I could see like if people had been falling down on the street with bleeding out of their eyes, and it was like, oh my God, flesh eating, and anyone that gets near them starts to bleed out of their eyes. Like, then it's like, all right, I don't have time to think about this. Administer. I'd be a little more open to like rushed experimental.
Yes. Well, look, you got to remember how bad Alpha and Delta were. They were pretty bad. And it killed lots of people. And the vaccine did put the brakes on it a little bit at that point. Now, would it have died down anyway, or how many lives were saved? I mean, we can argue all day about that, but it was bad. It was unclear. It wasn't unclear where it was going. It could have gotten worse as far as we were thinking at the time. And so I get it. I get, that we were scared and we were doing some extreme measures. We went way too long with them. And the fact that we continued them way beyond we should have, at least in certain states like this one, the one I'm in, it was just mind-boggling to me. But okay, and then now I have the same question. Why are we forcing this vaccine on kids when we have no randomized controlled trial on that? We have no evidence that it's useful. And it's a cold now. It does not hurt kids. What is it we're doing? And we do know that for males, it's causing myocarditis. And we do know that in one significant study, half of the males that had myocarditis at point A, half of them had signs of myocarditis a year later. That is profound. That means those kids are at risk and could potentially need a heart transplant down the road. And the fact that we're not, and for what, again, for Omicron, for a cold, and you're not doing anything to transmission, you're not protecting teachers, you're not doing anything by vaccinating the kids except following a bureaucratic mandate. And by the way, most countries in the world do not allow it.
Allow the mandate?
They don't have a mandate. They don't allow vaccinating kids and young adults.
That sounded like you said that myocarditis does go away. You said that some people show that they have it a year later. But does that indicate that other people, it will just recede and they can, their bodies
can go away. It can go away for sure.
What are some good treatments for that?
For myocarditis?
Yeah.
Well, there's there's three things that happen. One is you get arrhythmias, and those arrhythmias can cause sudden cardiac death. So the arrhythmias have to be treated or ablated with a wire that you send up into the heart and ablate that region that's creating the arrhythmias. Seen more of that in recent years than I care to talk about. So you can ablate, you can take medication for the arrhythmia, again, to prevent sudden death. Then if you're unlucky enough that you're one of these with the persistent myocarditis, theoretically, heart failure next. And when the heart failure gets bad enough, cardiac transplant.
Is the arrhythmia when like the heart swells inward and causes like a weird shape that when it like squeezes, it doesn't do the right pumping pressure?
Arrhythmias there are many, many thousands of arrhythmias. And the ability to push blood forward is one of, look, arrhythmias can be ventricular or atrial. They can be rapid rhythms and slow rhythms. They could, send your heart rate to 200, 250, and they can be irregular and they can predispose to stroke, or they can be regular and they can be so fast that the heart just can't pump blood forward, or it'll break down into other rhythms like ventricular fibrillation, which is sudden death.
I wonder if fasting helps, if they ever reduce swelling, because I've noticed that just in general, it helps reduce swelling for me.
No swelling involved.
Anecdotal.
There's no swelling involved with this.
Oh, okay. So it's not a type of swelling, myocarditis.
It's the muscle itself is inflamed. It's sick. It's not working right.
But is the inflammation not a type of swelling?
No.
Oh, what's the difference?
Swelling is something that happens when the inflammation causes breakdown of cells, and that attracts inflammatory cells that release cytokines and release inflammatory mediums that attract fluid, and the fluid is the swelling. But not all inflammation goes through that cycle like that.
Interesting. Okay. What is the root cause of inflammation?
Well, people, we probably should look up the definition, but when people talk about inflammation, they're often talking about many different things, right? Typically inflammation is immune cells attacking. That's typically inflammation, right? Immune cells coming in and unloading their contents, and they have chemicals in their cytoplasm that causes a reaction, causes things to break down, causes more cells to come in, causes blood vessels to open up, causes lymphatics to change, and causes fluid to be attracted to that area, and it breaks things down. Inflammation breaks things down. But very often, and like rheumatoid arthritis, is immune attack on the joint. Okay, so the synovium of the joint is getting attacked by your immune cells and breaking things down. But a lot of people these days talk about inflammation in a much more sort of generic way. They're really talking about the lining of your arteries and the relationship of the endothelium, the lining of the arteries, with certain kinds of lipids and certain kinds of immune cells that interact with the lining in such a way as to damage it, essentially. That's what they're talking about, this inflammation. And so you're getting cholesterol deposition in the lining of the arteries. You're getting narrowing of the arteries downstream. You're getting less blood supply downstream. And just having inflammatory mediators going all the time is not a healthy state.
The endothelial aspect of the what did you call it? God, a lot of these words, the arteries, the endothelial, or those are the inside of the artery walls.
Yeah, your arteries have a lining, And it's a very unique type of cell called an endothelial cell. And it actually creates its own organ system. The endothelial system is an organ system. And we didn't used to think of it that way, but it's fairly clear that it is its own organ system. And it's a very important organ system. It's one that, in recent years, we've been thinking about much more in terms of insulin resistance, in terms of cholesterol metabolism, in terms of central obesity and having all this adipose tissue and how that enhances the inflammatory response. So these are kind of new ideas.
Oh, seed oils. I've been listening a lot.
Seed oil is absolutely part of the story. So have you interviewed Kate Shanahan yet? I think I told you to interview her last time. Yeah.
No, I would love to.
Oh, you got to call her. I'll get you her contact info.
Excellent.
She is the oil queen, right? Or the fat queen. And she when I first met her, Kate is a biochemist, like a seriously trained scientist. She became a family practitioner. She got interested in nutrition. She became the doctor for the Lakers and the nutrition sort of advisor for the Lakers. And the first time I talked to her, I was sort of questioning her thoughts about nutrition. She goes, "Look, how anything gets inside the body is so complicated. I really can't say much about anything except this: oils, fats, healthy fats, unhealthy fats. And what we're doing with this is completely wrong." And she has a whole theory about the inflammatory response that we're creating through all these seed oils and all these unhealthy fats, these polyunsaturated fats that the government has declared you have to go with. And it was all been a sham. It's like the food pyramid. It was a mistake, and bureaucracies cannot change direction. COVID taught me this, and this is another example of that.
I heard last night, Luke Rakowski from We Are Change on the Best Political podcast had a guest on that was saying that you can't call it infant or baby formula unless it has seed oils in it. Wow. You have to call it something else, like infant formula. You can't say baby formula without. Wow. I haven't been able to confirm that that's true, but it was just fucking rocked me.
It turns out, after decades of preaching about margarine and decades of preaching about seed oils, it turns out your best bet. And by the way, some of these seed oils and vegetable oils become carcinogenic when you heat them up. And guess what? They got all the fast food companies to switch from tallow. Your best bet is meat, tallow, butter. Those are your healthiest fats, it turns out.
That's part of about going out to eat. That is, like, I love going out to eat and sampling all these different cuisines, but like, what oils do they use?
I know. I worry about that too. Kate was convinced that a large part of the inflammatory cytokine problem with COVID had to do with the seed oils and things. And I'm not. I don't have an opinion. I don't. Who knows? But she's a smart woman, and I read her stuff.
I'm looking forward to going deep with Kate. The B said, "Hope you feel better, Dr. Drew." Also, Ian, man, I'm super proud of your drive, brother. Keep it up.
Thank you, buddy. Is that a male or female? I can't tell.
It looks like it's Alex Jones, but feminine.
Thank you, B. It scares me a little bit when I'm in this kind of it's clear to me that the problem I'm having today is I do really poorly with anesthesia. I'm very sensitive to medication. I don't like it. And my brain does not work right for a couple of days after any kind of anesthesia. And I fear what I may say or might have said. I don't edit as well.
I've enjoyed
not clear when I try to express myself.
So how many times in your life have you been under anesthesia?
Because I have Lynch syndrome, right? So I have this DNA repair abnormality. And so I'm prone to cancers of the colon, the stomach, pancreas, prostate. I've already had prostate cancer, and I have to get colonoscopies every year to reduce my risk of, colon cancer. And so I get something now. I get Michael Jackson's milk. I get propofol every time I do that, and it takes me 2 days to recover. I've had a prostatectomy, which was that's a big operation. That was general anesthesia for like 6 hours. And I wasn't right for 6 months after that. I mean, and I can never tell, is it the tissue damage that I just don't do well after I've been injured like that? Or is it the anesthesia? I think it's the anesthesia. Oh. And so, yeah, anesthesia and me just do not. My brain is sensitive, I think is what it boils down to. And it's easily set off course.
Are there specific things you do to like recover from anesthesia?
Time, rest. I suppose I would exercise if I could, but after an operation, usually you can't, right? And this is no exception.
Or do you sauna?
Sauna would be good. Sauna would be good.
I'm going to sauna after this show. I keep thinking about it. We're talking about inflammation.
It's a great idea. It's a good idea.
Do you have one at your house?
I do not.
These things are fucking amazing.
It's a good idea.
Yeah, Tim bought one. I'll bet it's fucking, and it's the steam sauna. The infrared saunas I'm not so sold on because I did those and I felt it heating my endodermis, like the skin underneath. And the next day it still felt hot. I was like, dude, I don't want to get radiation.
I love steam. It's good for your respiratory tract. Really good for your respiratory tract.
Yeah. You ever follow Rhonda? Oh, what's that?
Costa, Costa's proud of you, I think, mate. I think that's because he's mate. Is he Australian?
I think he is, and I think he's proud of you too, Drew.
So, but I want to come see you guys in West Virginia. I thought you were going to move out of there.
We're in Maryland is the headquarters now, and it's moving to West Virginia to a bigger building.
West Virginia.
Well, actually forward to it. We haven't been there. This building hasn't been there. A lot of the business, like Tim has a house there, but the actual headquarters that you came to last time is here in Maryland. It's like right on the border, right in Knoxville. That kind of area.
I was at Harper's Ferry. I remember seeing Harper's Ferry. Okay.
That's West Virginia. That's like right across the bridge.
Okay. Got it.
All right. What else we got? Here we go. Oh, Rockstar Podcast. Dr. Drew's an absolute legend. Loveline was a trailblazing show and really helped me in navigating the world of dating while growing up in the 90s.
That was the goal. I was 24 years old, as I said, when I started doing it. And I now had this body of information that I wanted to share with people. What would I have wanted when I was 16 or 18? That was my naive little idea. It's like no one is talking to them, and if somebody had talked to me, it would have done so much good.
Dude, I used to lay in bed and listen to that show with you and Adam Carolla, and it would be like you guys talked a lot about like getting STD tests. Well, you did a lot, and I think it was like that was a big part of the theme. Was like get tested. Hey, part of my thing about giving people meds and things too. I want to put the test in people's hands too. Now you can pee on a stick and you can. I mean, why can we do home COVID test and we can't do home chlamydia and home HPV? What the hell? Why not? Is there no home test for that kind of thing?
There is home test for it, but why aren't we helping people access it?
I imagine because
I really feel so strongly about this. Just the way I felt when I started talking about relationships in the 80s. I have this same impulse now, which is we need to give people the goods, let them take care of themselves.
Is it just because it's so profitable to have them have to go to the doctor and spend an hour?
There's regulations and there's attorneys and I'm gonna have to figure that all out and see what it is. I think people are still going to be stuck doing some kind of telehealth visit, which is fine. I mean, I want people to get assessed and all, but
telehealth is well. Here's one from Adam Pierre. I'll ask you about telehealth. My wife and I must ask Dr. Drew to look into pandas and pans disorder and autoimmune inflammation and to discuss homeopathy and STEM, science, tech, something like that, medicine related to these issues. Please, it's very important to us and so many others at Adam Pierre 1 on X, DM sent on X. Ian, thanks, Adam Pierre. What is that pandas and pans disorder?
Pandas is, I think he's talking about a post-streptococcal thing. Let me double check that he means exactly what I think he means. And I can tell you about it. Pandas, of course, the bear is going to come up as soon as of course. Giant pandas, blah, blah, blah. Gosh darn it. Here we go. Panda symptoms in adults. OCD, restrictive eating habits, irritability, extreme. Yeah, it's this sort of neurological kind of a syndrome. Let's see what this says here. Pediatric autoimmune neuropsychiatric disorders associated with streptococcal infections. Yeah. And it's sort of built on the theory, and this is actually, it's controversial, and there are pandas experts out there. And I remember I was reporting on HLN, that outbreak of seizures that happened in this little town in New York. And we were wondering, could it have been a pandas phenomenon? And there was a group that went up there and did a lot of strep screening and convinced themselves it was pandas. Turned out it was just a hysterical, group hysteria, which now we know from COVID. I hope you understand they're very common. COVID was a large scale example of that.
It's hard when more.
Well, I was going to say is that strep, people forget that certain variety of streptococcus causes these downstream illnesses. They cause glomerulonephritis, kidney failure. They cause scarlet fever. They cause rheumatic fever. and they cause neurological problems. It used to be called St. Vitus dance, where people get these strange choreoathetoid movements. And I think that phenomenon has been more generalized to include other neuropsychiatric symptoms. I worry about that when everything goes under a single heading, because if you're a hammer, the whole world becomes a nail. Yet I am very open to people contemplating and always thinking about this as a possible cause of certain psychiatric problems.
Oh, strep itself.
Yeah.
It can cause downstream Interesting.
Yeah.
I had a really bad case of strep one year and went to bed and had a horrible nightmare that I was in a trench in World War I with my dad next to me. And he kept getting up and going over and getting shot and killed. And it kept repeating. And I woke up in this deep, deep sweat. I mean, that was a psychological problem, a dark nightmare. And it just came, and that was just like probably pain related or whatever.
It could be, or who knows, maybe some immune reaction was going on in your head. It really points out something interesting. Okay. And this is an interesting thing, which is, my first job at the psychiatric hospital was doing medical assessments of psychiatric patients. And I ended up running the department for a few years. And I can't tell you how frequently medical conditions were either causing or caused by the psychiatric syndrome. Medical disorders are frequently associated with psychiatric symptoms: heart disease, depression, encephalitis. I diagnosed an encephalitis once. This woman was having these horrible psychotic episodes. I mean, there can be all kinds of things medically that show up psychiatrically. It doesn't, however, this is the part I want to emphasize, it doesn't mean the psychiatric symptoms should not be treated, because people hurt themselves when they're in certain states psychiatrically, and it requires containment and hospitalization many times while you do the medical workup. For instance, if somebody has a stroke and that makes them manic, they're still manic, and that will need to be dealt with.
Is it like the psychiatric stuff causing, or if not causing, but correlating with a physiological, or I guess would you call it medical problems? Is it psychiatric and medical, or psychiatric and physical?
No. So you got to listen carefully. So let's say you have a stroke in the thalamus and you're an older male. That is a well-known cause of mania, severe, full-on psychiatric mania. So just because it was caused by a stroke doesn't mean you don't have a psychiatric problem. You still have to deal with that. Okay.
Do you find it works the other way around as well? That like
it does work the other way around, where I mean, addiction being the most obvious thing, but where people hurt themselves medically because of using substances. But for sure, people get in states where their body reacts eventually.
That's like my number one fascination with the medical and just health in general, is when psychological situations can cause physical trauma.
It's more the case, though, that some underlying medical problem is causing the psychiatric problem.
Oh, and it's got to be like it's just a spiraling cycle if that's the case.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we are just one entity, right? We are one biological entity. We have this organ in our skull, and this organ is not different than the rest and is affected by the rest. So
especially the stomach.
What about stomach?
The stomach, all the neurons in the stomach and in the heart, like they're like three different brains. I think of those three working together.
That is 100% true. And earlier, 45 minutes ago, we were talking about feelings. That's where feelings come from. So when we talk about having a feeling, we're, like, oh my God, it hurts in my chest. When I lose somebody or have grief. Yeah. Because there's a brain overlying your heart there that is hurting, causing pain.
Man, this has been fucking awesome, dude. We've gone over an hour. Actually, absolutely spectacular. We didn't talk about, yeah, man, it was rock and roll. You're younger after, I think that age, like genetic age and solar age, are different. You can go around the sun 100 times, but have the body of a genetically 50-year-old, or vice versa. You can go around the sun 20 or 30 times and have a body of a 55-year-old because you've done so much cellular. So I love staying young, healthy, and youthful.
Look at the oxidative. You said NMN, which is nicotinamide mononucleotide, and I'm not totally sure about NMN. I'm pretty sure NR is good. I'm pretty sure about that.
I think,
and then beyond that, should you be taking? Crap, I take so much stuff. Should you be taking DHEA to support your testosterone metabolism? Should you be taking fish oils, particularly DHA for the brain? I do that. Should you be taking trace elements? I do that. I think so. I mean, there's a lot of things you can now pay attention to that really help optimize health especially if you're managing your diet properly and vigorously exercising. Resistance training is the key.
Like a plank, like just a long plank.
Weights. It's why my shoulders are fucked up, but it's because I was a nut to lift very heavy weights for way too long. But
do you ever eat gold?
No.
Colloidal gold. They say, like you say, trace elements, a lot of iron you get in your diet, the metals, some of these, a lot of the gold's been mined out of the earth, I've heard. So we don't have it in our diet. Like we used to have trace gold, trace platinum, these things in the diet. And you can get like colloidal gold as a supplement. And I've heard what my personal anecdotal experience is, I was stretching, and when the muscle would tear, instead of tearing, it would seep in, and like clay, I could stretch way farther without it ripping.
Interesting. So you know what a colloid is, right?
Yes, a colloid is one or more atoms of an element, or is that
it's just a suspension. It's really a suspension of an element, and it needs. I don't know how the gold would get into your body. I mean, we used to use gold to treat, but I don't know how it gets absorbed. We used to treat when we used back in the day. People don't know this. We used gold to treat rheumatoid arthritis because it is an immune suppressant. And we couldn't get it in orally, so we would give it by shot.
Were you guys using monoatomic? I've heard that it's monoatomic is where you can get it to go through the brain or the blood barrier.
I don't know. No, I don't know what. Again, I haven't thought about that in years. We just know we used to use it.
Also, I was told that it coats the neurons in the brain and causes them to superconduct. I don't know how to verify that.
I don't believe that.
And also, when you pee, it's gold.
That's interesting. Yeah, hope you got it back.
Last question for you, dude. How'd you get involved with Kelly Victory with your new show?
So I was during COVID, that whole thing was such a shock to me. My wife started doing a streaming show. She was doing podcasting and things and having me do podcasts on addiction and things like that. And we'd stream it sometimes. And finally she said, we need to do a regular streaming show because we're all stuck at home anyway. And so she got a friend of ours to help us out, and we started doing this show 3 days a week. And at the time, I felt like the French underground. I felt like I was just trying to give people, because you couldn't get the information anywhere. It was just all this shibboleths, these empty slogans, this bullshit that was being just pounded out by the public health. And I was trying to get, the truth and the landscape and try to help people understand things, because it was all an evolving, moving target at the time. And I used to be on KBC radio in Los Angeles, and my wife still listens to that station. And she came back one day and she goes, I heard this doctor on the radio and she is amazing. She knows what she's talking about. She's going to be a little different than you, but she's got opinions and she can just substantiate it. I said, great. I love different opinions. I love conversing and dialoguing and debating. And she came in, and there was clearly something there. And she's very well trained. She's got what it takes to be, from a training standpoint and experience standpoint, to be talking about some of the things she was talking about. And after the first couple of shows, she goes, and oh, by the way, I'm married to, and she mentioned somebody, my best friend from medical school. I was like, oh my God, too small a world.
Oh, that's awesome.
And that's so we've been doing it ever since, and she's been a great addition. She's terrific. And
is it Ask Dr. Drew? Is that the show?
Yeah, we're at most Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. We move it around a little bit, but it's generally Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 3:00 Pacific time. And I've sort of wanted it to be now conversations primarily with people who have been canceled. There's so many people out there that have been canceled that were incredibly important sources of information, decorated scientists and professionals. I want to hear what they have to say. And for me, the poster child for that group is Jay Bhattacharya. This is the guy you chose to cancel. You've got to be effing kidding me. Well, and he has just been a great source, and we've interviewed him many times. And so from almost every single one of the people I've interviewed, I've learned something extraordinary. I haven't agreed with everything everybody has said by any means, but each one of them I've left going, wow, that is interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's the deepest fucking knowledge, dude. I love that show. Anyone that wants like just hard medical knowledge, I highly recommend.
Thank you. Appreciate
those episodes. Dude, Great to see you again, man.
You as well. I'll see you
fuck.
hopefully in person in West at Harper's Ferry.
That's
Where
what
you
I'm
guys are.
talking about, dog. Yes. And soon it will be out at Free Damastan. It's exciting. We're moving forward. So everyone else listening, like the video, subscribe to the channel and share it with your friends and your relatives and all of your loved ones and people maybe you even aren't getting along with right now. Maybe they'll like it too. Drew, as always, brother.
See ya. Cheers, man.
Bye.
Take care.